What movie has a plot hole that can't be ignored? The Santa Claus. The parents are so skeptical that Santa Claus exists, but the movie clearly shows Santa delivering presents on Christmas Eve. So where TF do the parents think those gifts came from? In Monsters Incorporated, when Mike tells Sully you've been jealous of my good looks since the 4th grade, but they met in college. The amount of electricity available in a quiet place. They would need some serious generators to keep their security cameras, iPods, radio, safety lights running every day/night, and generators make a lot of noise. Also, just live by the waterfall. The witch in Snow White using magic to transform herself into an old woman in order to trick Snow White into eating the poisoned apple instead of just using magic to make herself look more beautiful than Snow White. In the show Friends, Chandler and Joey love the movie Die Hard, and then Rachel starts dating Bruce Willis and they say nothing. Just saw the new Jurassic Park in the theater. None of the dinosaurs have buttholes. I couldn't even see it. Haven't gone back to check the older Jurassic Park movies to verify. In Threat Level Midnight, the president is found to be corrupt and in cahoots with the villain, Golden Face. However, at the end, the president calls upon the hero Michael Scarn for another mission. In episode 2F09, when Archie plays Scratch's skeleton like a xylophone, he strikes the same rub in succession, yet he produces two clearly different tones. I mean, what are we to believe? That this is a magic xylophone? Or something? Haha. Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder. Waterworld. There is no land. It's just water, but yet everybody is freaking filthy with dirt. Waterworld. Paper is the most valuable resource next to dirt. People smoking cigarettes through the entire movie. On Friends, it never explains why Ross doesn't eat the smaller friends. How did Isma and Kronk beat Cusco and Patcher back to her lair? The atmosphere on Mars is only about 0.6% as dense as Earth's. Even in a 300 miles per hour wind you'd only feel about 6 pounds of force. Hardly enough to throw Matt Damon across a freaking valley. Couldn't they have just had him fall into a collapsed lava tube or something? Cinderella, her stepmother and stepsisters don't recognize her at the ball, and then Prince Charming doesn't recognize her face, but rather relies on the glass slippers. Somehow Cinderella has an absurdly unique shoe size that conveniently don't disappear like the rest of her enchanted gifts. Why doesn't Tarzan have a beard? In the core, they make a big fuss over getting unobtainium to build their ship, since nothing can cut it, and it'll stand up to the heat and pressure of the Earth's core. Then they show a montage of the ship being built, where unobtainium panels are cut to size using a welding torch. What? In Liar Liar, when Jim Carrey confesses about her stuff to his secretary, she asks him a question. He tells the truth, which pisses her off. Then to keep her from quitting on him as she marches away, he yells to her, "I didn't understand the question," which is a lie. Terminator 2. The time machine requires living beings made of flesh to travel through, but the T-1000 can also travel through despite the fact that it's made of liquid metal. The Purge. In its entirety. So I get that emergency services are suspended during the Purge, but what happens afterwards? So I kill someone during the Purge. I don't go to jail. I get that. But if I steal someone's car after the Purge is over, I still have their car. Can I go to the DMV, change the registration to me and just say, "Don't worry about the paperwork, I purged it"? What if you started killing someone during the Purge, but they didn't die until afterwards? Blues Brothers. The entire plot is to raise funds to pay the property tax on an orphanage run by the Catholic Church. The property would not be subject to property tax as it's a non-for-profit and a church-owned building. In The Butterfly Effect, when the protagonist goes to jail, he goes back to elementary school to maim himself by putting holes through his hands so that he can prove to his cellmate that he has this ability. However, it has already been firmly established that that's not how his powers work. The cellmate wouldn't see the holes magically appear, as the protagonist would have already had them. Last GD. Why the Lightspeed kamikaze lady couldn't just have told the rest of the rebels the plan is beyond common sense. In Star Trek Generations, Pickard goes into the Nexus, which allows him to leave at any point in space and time. Why not go back 5 days instead of 5 minutes? He could warn his brother and nephew about the fire, play along for the next few days, and look like a genius when he uncovers Dr. Soren's plot. Kirk doesn't need to be involved. Before someone mentions shagging with the timeline, the star exploding already happened, or those people already died, or otherwise Pickard wouldn't reach the Nexus. To save everyone, he has to make a new timeline where no one dies. If that's the case, what's 2 more people? In his chalkboard diagram, Doc says that he and Marty can't go forward in time from the alternate 1985 to get the almanac, because they would just end up in an alternate 2015. But if that's the case, then how did Buff bring back the dealer into them in the first place, after altering history himself in 1955? In Ant-Man the science makes no sense and they are not linear with it. I'm pretty sure at some point it's said that changing the size only changes the distance between atoms, therefore you will still have the same mass. But then 30 minutes later he is running on the barrel of a gun, as if he weighs a minuscule amount. Makes no sense. Also, going smaller than atoms also doesn't really work too well. How old is the Beast when he was cursed, and where are his parents? In a nutshell, the bratty prince answers the door and the witch curses him because he was totally rude to her. They explicitly say that when the prince turns 21 years old, the curse cannot be unbroken. However, in the song Be Our Guest, Lumiere establishes that they have been cursed for 10 years. 10 years we've been rusting / needing so much more than dusting / needing exercise. A chance to use our skin. Ergo, the bratty prince in the prologue is no more than 11 years old when he was cursed. The parents are obviously not included in the story. Where are his parents? Why did a witch bother cursing an 11-year-old when preteens are naturally selfish and sassy and often grow out of it when they get older? That witch needs some thicker skin if she's going to go around cursing preteens, who are probably orphaned, for mouthing off, or a lot of kids are going to get cursed. In the movie Barnyard, all the cows have udders including the males. The Lost World, Jurassic Park. How did the crew of the ship get eaten by a fully grown adult T-Rex that was locked in the ship's hold? The baby was taken to San Diego on a plane. Batman Begins. A microwave transmitter would cook people alive and boil the water inside their bodies, not just boil water inside pipes. Signs. Aliens are hydrophobic, but can still run around cornfields at night. Apparently they were immune to dew. Alien. Covenant. You land on a foreign planet. Your instruments say there's breathable air, and your first thought is to take off your helmets. What the actual hell? If you see plant life similar to Earth's, and you are aware, as a scientist, just how many bacteria there is, what makes you think the same, or worse, is not true for this completely foreign place you've never been on? If they just kept their suits on, the entire movie plot would not have happened in the first place. James and Lily Potter could have been their own secret keepers, as Bill and Arthur Weasley showed us in the Deathly Hallows. There was no need whatsoever for Peter Pettigrew. Voldemort would have never found Harry Potter. In the first Captain America, there was no reason he had to crash the plane. He had full control over it, and just cold kept flying, until Peggy connected him with Stark, who helped him land. There was no indication whatsoever that the plane was set to auto fire once it was over New York. He cold literally turned the plane around, if he was actually worried that it could do that, and waited for Stark's help. The orbit that the debris in gravity didn't make sense. How can this debris be traveling at a higher speed, but in the same orbit? If it was going so much faster that it could tear apart the space station, then it would have been in such an elliptical orbit that it probably would have only made one pass. The whole premise of their danger was extremely flawed. In the last Kingsman movie, The Golden Circle, they make a point of giving the heroes a minesweeper during the let's gear up before the mission scene. Mention it by name, and show it on screen. Eggsy has the freaking thing in hand, on camera right next to his freaking foot, and still steps on a landmine. Superman turns back time to save Lois Lane. Literally every single bad thing to happen in any of the Superman films, or the DC universe, could be stopped by Superman simply changing the course of history. How in hell can Rei swim in the latest Star Wars movie if she grew up in a desert planet? I'd go with Independence aliens being vulnerable to a virus from a Mac notebook designed by someone with no expertise in the alien's computer system, even if we ignore compatibility issues. The entirety of the plot of the fifth Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Not only does the film give a backstory to Jack's compass, which contradicts an earlier explanation, the entire film's premise is how Salazar will be released once the compass is given away. So let's conveniently ignore the fact that Jack has given the compass to Elizabeth Beckett, an actual villain, and even Will, right before he throws him overboard. Compass and all, to be lost for days, all without a second thought. It's like they didn't even try coming up with the fifth plot. They probably didn't. Silence of the Lambs. Lecter is so dangerous they have to put him in a fortified gym surrounded by the military, ironically with their guns facing out. But to watch over him day to day inside the gym they're assigned to doddering geriatric security guards who he easily overpowers and kills to make his escape. Why did Dr. Octopus steal gold coins? Did he go exchange them for cash and then buy the materials for his doomsday machine? Did the city's most infamous criminal just walk into a pawn shop or something? How would he get all the materials without anyone contacting the authorities? Why even go through the trouble of stealing the gold coins and exchanging them for cash? Why did he just steal the materials? There are just too many questions to be asked about this ridiculous scenario. Backdoor Sluts 5-7 never explained how their asses already had jelly falling out before the large cocks went in. A whole generation of men just assume that anus is a slick. If Buzz Lightyear thinks he's a space ranger, then why does he freeze up like a toy whenever Indy enters the room? How come Marty's parents don't remember him? I mean, he was a pretty huge part of their lives in 1955. He saved his dad's life. His grandpa almost hit him with a car. He ate dinner at his grandparents' house with his mother and said some pretty weird stuff by their standards. He invented the skateboard in front of his parents. He got his parents together. He invented rock and roll and heavy metal along with writing Johnny B. Good in front of his parents, and he somehow knew about a fire that their future son would start. Back to the Future is the perfect movie, but I feel like his parents would have gotten suspicious when Marty grew up and reminded them of their old friend Calvin. The fact that the Joker in The Dark Knight drives a bus through the bank walls in the middle of broad daylight in heavy traffic then merging into the school bus lane without anyone noticing has always bothered me. Jurassic Park. There was a huge drop where the T-Rex was just standing. Just a thought. Maybe people should Google what a plot hole is before commenting here. Most I've seen here are people complaining that characters did ABC instead of Ziz. How does Leah remember her mother? Shawshank Redemption. When Andy climbs through the hole in his cell, the poster covering it goes back on the wall, which the warden rips down when they discover it. How did he manage to put the poster up from inside the tunnel? Black Panther. When Killmonger shows up, after earning the loyalty of the man whose parents were killed by Claw, Black Panther knows that he is the one who helped Claw elude him. Why doesn't he tell his friend? He may have killed him, but he was also working with him, and is a reason why I wasn't able to bring him back to you. Harry Potter. Do mothers just not love their kids? Shouldn't children who are impervious to the dark arts be everywhere after the war if all you had to do was die to protect them? How come the people in Snowpiercer all have different accents, even though most of them were born and raised on the same train? Eater. People saying it's to demonstrate class differences. That's completely not true. The two lower class BFF boys have different accents. One guy has an Irish accent despite being an orphan, and no other person has an Irish accent anywhere on the train. In The Matrix, the machines had the power and resources to harvest the minuscule amounts of electricity that each human produces to keep themselves running. And they had the power to make a drill, to drill down into Zion. And they had flying squid bots to search and destroy humans who had escaped. But they didn't have the intelligence or resources or build giant solar panels that could break through the clouds. Maybe with balloons attached that could power the computers from sunlight. I mean, we saw Neo and Trinity in the last film fly through the cloud layer and end up in the sky. suggesting there is still the atmosphere required for those balloons and they were originally powered by solar power according to the Animatrix, hence why the humans blanketed the earth with cloud. Even if they keep the humans in the Matrix purely as a sort of prison, or a way to keep them around after the peace due to the lack of food, they don't need humanity. They can just make some solar panels and bring them above the cloud layer. Signs. Why would the aliens land on a planet 75% covered with water and continuous rainfall without any protective clothing if water was going to harm them? Just the fact that the time turner used in Prisoner of Azkaban exists creates plot holes in all the Harry Potter books/movies. The older Weasley brothers had the Marauders map for X amount of time, and every night during that time they saw their brother on sleeping next to Peter Pettigrew and said nothing. Kudos to their tolerance. In 2012, when all cell phone/communication networks go down and later in the movie Indian geologist is on and satellite phone near the end of the movie as a tsunami encroaches on him. Many holes in the movie, and my recollection of it, but that is the one that ruined it for me. Also, I bottled wine today. Quality control got the best of me. In Titanic, nobody realizes that that's Hollywood movie sensation Billie Zane. Last GD. Why is a large part of the movie centered around a low-speed chase through space? Nobody in the First Order thought to macro jump a couple of ships ahead of the Resistance in order to finish them off? The whole Toy Story thing. Some of the toys have batteries and some don't. I never understood why there was a need for batteries. Like the walkie-talkies. It shouldn't need batteries. Else the toys like Buzz would be always switching out batteries. First Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Small but can't unnotice. When the Black Pearl attacks for the first time, Elizabeth is taken away for the whole parley thing. We see her taken on a small boat and everything. After that, the moon finally shines through the clouds and Jack is visited in his prison, which is when one of the pirates slams his arm into the moonlight, revealing the curse. Aka. It becomes skeletal. To Elizabeth. She only learns about the curse much later. So what happened on the small boat? The moon appeared from behind the clouds. She was in the same port as Jack, so no big difference in cloud structure, basically none. There was no cover on water in a tiny boat, yet she doesn't learn about the curse. How? Face/off. Nicolas Cage's John Travolta has sex with John Travolta's wife. She doesn't know what her husband's peen looks like. Room too dark? All of a sudden her husband just has a new peen. Or did they swap those out completely during the transplant surgery too? Imagine that conversation. We are also going to transplant peens. Just in case. Right as John Travolta goes under. In the remake of Red Dawn, North Korea invades the US and the US military is nowhere to be found. They explain North Korea invading the US with they got help from China. As for why the US Army isn't anywhere, the explanation is they got hit with a massive EMP, so they couldn't really respond. Guns can still fire after an EMP blast, so really where the hell were they? Black Panther. How on earth did the Stone Age Wakandans not just naturally spread over the world with their superior technology? Ancient societies were generally expansive, and the Wakandans show they are inclined as such from their subjugation of the other 4 tribes in modern day Wakanda. B. Why didn't anyone invade the incredibly poor Wakanda? Exposing their technology. It's one thing to isolate yourself, but others will still try and force contact. There's no way Thanos could snap with that metal gauntlet on. Ocean's 8. Sarah Paulson's character would be arrested immediately. She just started working at Vogue 3 weeks before the event. Found the fake necklace. Invited the guy they pinned it onto the event in the first place. And disappeared right afterwards to run a criminal warehouse-sized stolen goods operation. I'm actually mad about how bad this detail was. In Shrek 2, when Shrek is captured and imprisoned, the fairy tale creatures at his house see it on TV and come to rescue him. Never mind that he only has until midnight that night and is far far away. It took him and days or weeks to get there, based on the beginning of the movie. Yet somehow they get there and save him by the end of the night, with time to spare for them to save Fiona. Batman and Robin. That movie has a litany of plot holes that would take a thesis to explain here. The most obviously glaring one to me is the Bat credit card. I mean, what bank is that linked to? How does Batman pay off the Bat credit card? Does he use a slush fund offshore somewhere? Does Alfred know about this? You're meaning to tell me that Batman's more financially involved and economically sensible enemies, Penguin, Black Mask, etc., wouldn't have figured out his identity by following the money when all of a sudden Batman is dropping millions of dollars on his no-limit credit card? I'm still flabbergasted at that to this day. In Transformers Dark of the Moon, Sentinel Prime crash lands on the moon in the 60s, already having an old mode of a vehicle that did not exist in that era and having never been to Earth prior. IDK if Mamma Mia has been mentioned yet, but like, the whole problem could have been solved with a single DNA test. And how can you sing about not having money when you own a hotel on a Greek island, lady? In Terminator Genesis, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese travel from the 80s forward into the future without ever conceiving a child, yet John Connor exists and calls Sarah mother. Can we point out plot holes in TV shows? In The Office episode Stress Relief, Dwight gets Toby to sign his apology letter by agreeing to buy a case of Dos Girl Scout cookies from Toby's daughter Sasha. Then in the episode Secretary's Day, Oscar makes a parody video of Kevin as Cookie Monster. In the video, Cookie Monster asks Oscar if he has seen the Girl Scout cookies that Toby was supposed to have left on his chair. But in season 8 in the episode Last Day in Florida, Toby and Daryl are battling to have Kevin order Girl Scout cookies from their daughters, and Toby says, "It's Sasha's first year in the troops." No, it's not. It gets me every time. This might not be an issue if Sasha being in the Girl Scouts had not been used in arguably the most popular episode of the entire series, Stress Relief. The end of Back to the Future. Doc Brown shows up and is all like, "Hurry, Marty, we have to do something about your kids, hurry, we don't have time. You have a freaking time machine." The Dark Knight. Batman jumps out of building to catch Rachel, lands on a car that smashes yet is perfectly okay. Joker and his armed goons are still in the building occupying the space, and he just acts like it doesn't matter. How do they have a mosasaur in Jurassic World? I know the science behind it is already crazy, but if they are relying on mosquitoes to get DNA, how did a mosquito fly deep into the ocean, bite an aquatic creature, and then fly all the way back to a tree to get stuck in sap? Nick Dunn has plenty of evidence in Gone Girl to convict Amazing Amy for giving false evidence to procure a capital punishment for her husband. The security cameras would have captured Amy voluntarily residing with DC, the gifts and the increased medical insurance she bought, inconsistencies in the alibi she shares with the police or FBI. I think, in the end, just a couple of evidences. We have all sorts of guided munitions for our armed forces today, but in Star Wars, with highly advanced tech, they only straight line blasters? Pew pew. Deep Blue Sea. After 89 minutes they simply escape up a ladder that was there all along. In A Quiet Place. Why didn't she give birth at the waterfall? Why don't they just live there? Why didn't Drive Strange just lingering hole cut Thanos' hand off the way that one did for the Cull Obsidian? Or Timeston his ass into an infant? Hitch. In Ant-Man, what the heck is he breathing when he goes subatomic? It, not plot holes. The butterfly effect is a minefield of plot holes, but one always stood out to me. For those unfamiliar with the plot, Ashton Kutcher can go back in time to change decisions he made throughout his life to create new realities. In a series of shocking twists, these changes often have drastic consequences. In one reality, Ashton is in prison and for some reason needs to convince his cellmate that he is the second coming or some crap. Ashton does his time jump trick to be back in his elementary school class, where he impales both of his hands. Back in prison, his cellmate is won over by Ashton's seeming ability to conjure stigmata scars out of thin air. The problem here is that given the rules laid out by the movie, Ashton would have had those scars since childhood. Therefore his scars wouldn't have appeared while in jail. They would have been there all along. The appropriate response from his cellmate shouldn't have been, "Wow, a miracle, but you're pretty fricked up if you think impaling your own hands proves you're Christ." Not only this, but apparently intentionally impaling your hands in grade school suffers no further consequences which could potentially change your future. Wings off of a butterfly. History changed. Child self-inflicts serious bodily damage. No societal response. This is a dumb movie that I have seen way too many times, albeit not in years. Possibly just to hate watch this one scene. So, early in the movie, the one guy takes off an article of clothing so he can lasso something, tape recorder, and bring it closer. Then later all rowley edit, the other guy, who saw the first guy do it, has to do is grab a phone that's slightly out of reach. So he takes off rowley an article of clothing. Hooray. He figured it out. He's going to use it to grab the phone. Right? That makes sense. Considering they foreshadowed it earlier. Nope. He uses it as a tourniquet and cuts off his own leg. Limitless. Smartest man alive forgets to pay back the money he borrowed from the mob. Nobody recognizes Clark Kent as Superman because he removes his glasses. The entire premise of Iron Man 2 is based on the fact that Tony's chest device is killing him because the palladium in the reactor is poisoning him, yet he can't take it out or he dies. But the reason he would die if he took it out is that it contains an electromagnet that keeps shrapnel away from his heart. But an electromagnet does not need a palladium-powered CFE reactor to run. Tony could just swap the power source for a car battery like in the first movie. The shrapnel would be kept away from his heart and palladium would be gone. So he would survive. In Back to the Future, Marty goes back to 1955. This ignores the fact that time travel is impossible. Took me a few viewings to catch it. Star Wars. Accelerating into hyperspace can be used as a weapon apparently. Armageddon. There is no way it's easier to train drillers to be astronauts than it is to train astronauts to be drillers. I remember on the DVD commentary for that film, Ben Affleck asked Michael Bay about it, and Michael Bay told him to shut the frick up. He probably knew it didn't even make sense. The Dark Knight Rises. How does Bruce travel from the pit to Gotham City? He is halfway across the world, completely broke, has no access to anything, and all this sorting out the means of traveling / actually traveling is happening in the span of a few days.